Am I starting or are you starting?
Welcome to the Mind Club Theology Podcast. We're delighted to be with you all today, those listening or watching, and we're delighted to be joined today by Susan, Laszlo, and Elly. And so we wondered if you could start us off by telling us who you are and and then we'll dive into more about your work. So Susan.
Hi, I'm a writer and a recent theology graduate from the University of Waterloo from Conrad Grebel College. But I write and I edit fiction and nonfiction.
And Conrad Grebel, does that mean you're a Mennonite background?
You don't have to be, but
No,
I'm actually.
you don't have to be.
So while I did my degree, I was not. But actually, this Sunday we're in the process of joining the Mennonite Church.
Oh, wonderful.
So almost. I think I'm almost Mennonite.
Wonderful.
Congratulations, yeah.
And that's Lauren Elly.
Yeah, so I am a worship pastor in the Christian Reformed Church in St. Catharines, so at a church called Covenant. That's where I do my work. Yeah. And then I'm married to Laszlo.
Yeah, and thank you so much for having us. I'm Laszlo, and I teach in the Department of Political Science at Huron University College and at King's University College and at the University of Waterloo in social development at Renaissance. So I do a little bit of a few things, and I just returned from Rwanda from a 8 days long engagement with students from Huron University College. So glad to be here. Thanks so much for the invitation.
Mm-hmm.
That sounds amazing. We'll have to have you back on to talk all about your work in Rwanda.
Will be my pleasure. Absolutely.
Yes. Well, we're so delighted that we could have the three of you on today to talk a little bit about the work that you did and the writing that you did for the journal. So, Susan, I wonder if I could ask you to start and give us just a brief summary of what your piece was about for our listeners.
For sure. So my dad was diagnosed with dementia. I have gray hair, but my parents had me young, and I'm in my mid-50s. My parents are in their mid-70s. My dad and most people in my family live to be in their 90s. So this is more introduction than you need, but about 2 years ago, my dad was diagnosed with dementia. And it was unexpected, although maybe for a couple of months we had some idea of it. And I was trying to figure out a way to connect with him. And the way that I found that was really helpful was through reading aloud to him. And so the piece that I wrote is about that experience of reading the book Watership Down to my dad and thinking about it theologically, I think as well, to say it wasn't just something to pass the time. It was not the equivalent of, I don't know, American Idol or something like that. It was a way to really engage him with the challenges that he was facing, the new challenges that he was facing, and then a way for that to sort of work on me as well.
And Susan, how did your dad respond to the reading?
He respond. I mean, I talk about this in the piece of writing. It was a friend who suggested it. Like she said, you could listen to music together. And I don't like Motown and he does. And I thought, okay, no, that's never been a point of connection. And so other people could do that. But I thought we have always loved reading. And he gave me the book Watership Down when I was a child. And I thought, I think that would be a good book to read with him. So we started reading it. And one of the things that comes with dementia is a fair bit of anxiety. And he also has a kind of dementia that has a Parkinson's aspect to it. So what was interesting to me, out of the corner of my eye, I'm drinking, because like reading loudly with voices, like doing all the different characters, for a long time was a lot. And but out of the corner of my eye, I'm also watching, I watch his hands still, and I watch his face settle. And then when I would pause, he would ask questions, or we would talk about the book, and we made like this little book club almost. I mean, just for an afternoon, but then again that evening, and then again the next day while I was visiting. There was enough, like he had lost enough memory that he didn't know where it was going to go, but he had some idea. So it was like a vague memory for him. It was a familiar world, but not one where it wasn't like rewatching the same episode that you've watched 10 times. It was fairly new, but also a bit familiar to him. And I think that combination, as well as just hearing a voice that he knew, reading an interesting story, was a really calming but stimulating at the same time experience for him.
What a beautiful gift you could give to your father. Thank you, Susan.
And to me too, because I didn't want to just sit there, and I didn't want to just feel sorry for him and forget that he had always been the smartest person in the room. It was a way of connecting all those different pieces together. So for me, the gift was my friend making that suggestion, because I thought I was going to have to listen to music. That's what people often say, is that music is a way of connecting. And so this was something that was more like, it was us, it was him, it was me. It was the same as it had been too, which was really nice.
Well, that's amazing. Thank you so much for sharing. And Laszlo and Elly, could you talk to us a little bit about the piece that you wrote?
Oh, sure. Yeah, thank you. Yeah, first and foremost, thank you so much again for this wonderful opportunity. We thought about writing a piece, and really kind of, and I think just very much along the lines of Susan as well. It's a little bit of it was a little quite actually it's quite therapeutic for us as well, is to kind of write things down and kind of document what was going on and what was happening, because things were just happening too fast. Very, very fast. So from November 2020 until March 2021, and we're talking about over 4 months, and then during that time, everything changed. Talking about disruption, right? So we went from living with mom, and she was relatively healthy with some minor issues, to, well, that's a terminal brain cancer, and you have about 3 to 6 months to live. And and so that was really, and I didn't have any experience with any of this sort, while we're still dating and we're kind of navigating COVID. We were navigating the hospital system, the healthcare system, navigating an illness, navigating distance from family as well, both on the part of my wife, because Ellie's from Surrey, BC, and the family was out there, and then my family is still in Europe. So that was just it was a very kind of, and so there are a number of different things that happened. And I think this morning when we spoke about this podcast, it kind of certain ideas crystallized. And I think there were two tracks simultaneously. One was this notion of, you really hope that she can get better. Initially, my thought process was such, because I didn't really understand the disease, because the physicians and the nurses and the healthcare professionals kept saying, listen, I mean, in not so many words initially, but later on say, there's no way out of here. But at the same time, and so I bought her a QB bike, and we got her to bike in the hospital all the time, and to exercise, and to do whatever you want. And then slowly, the second track was this notion that you got to let go. Slowly but surely let go. And once we got to that point, or the closer I got to the point of letting go, in some ways, the clearer it became what I needed to do on a daily basis. So, for example, to be there, to speak with her on the telephone, I read the Bible to her, for example. So she really wanted me to read the New Testament. So we went through 3 of the 4 books of the apostles, So but the more and the clearer it became that this really is terminal, the clearer it became to us what we needed to do on a daily basis. To reconnect with family, to get her your favorite food, to be there for her, to things like I would wash her or clean her dentures, for example, right? So I became and we became kind of kind of caretakers for her or of her in the hospital, right? So the time that we spent with her, he wasn't just sitting around and talking; it was more like taking care of her as well. So we became partners with the nurses and the physicians and so on. So this is really interesting. But again, I think the best way to describe it is these two tracks. One track was to say, well, hopefully she'll get better. Hopefully she'll get better. Hopefully she'll get to go home. On the other hand, this other track where no, it's not going to happen, and most likely it's not going to happen. But then there's many things to do still, and spending time with her was one of them, and to really hold her hand.
Mm-hmm. And yeah, and I think for me, one of well, it was kind of a twofold thing that I recognized pretty quickly that Laszlo, his main focus needed to be his mother, right? Like that was sort of, this is the relationship that has been steady through his whole life, and this is the one that is coming to a close. And so how are ways that I can be there as a support to him through that, so that he then can also support his mother. And then it's also through a time when we're kind of getting to know each other as well. And I'm wanting to get to know my future mother-in-law, because we got engaged right around the time that she had surgery, her first surgery for the brain tumor. And so recognizing that she's my family too, and I wanted to get to know her before I lost her as well. And so getting to meet somebody in their most vulnerable stage too was just a really profound experience for me as well. And I think that brought us very close together very quickly as well.
So I think just a final thought here. I'm not sure if we captured everything in that piece, or I'm not sure if we captured everything that we just spoke about, because I think the key word for me is they're definitely profound. It's much more. There's an element of, and I'm going to use the word mystical, an element of beyond rationality, beyond emotion. There's something were happening. Some things were happening that were kind of beyond us, but they were happening, and it was really profound. Yeah.
Can I jump in with a question? So when I read the piece of writing that you did, Laszlo and Elly, what it made me think of, I really appreciated it. It felt like a privilege to sit in on that process. But what it really reminded me of was when people share birth stories. You hear someone who's given birth and they say, we had this plan and then this happened and then that happened. And, I mean, maybe any story works like that, but I think because it's at that liminal moment of death, it's like not, most people can't tell their own death story. You witnessed that, you midwifed it in a way. And that story is important. Like part of me wants to know what your mother's experience was, but I also think that that experience was there for you. Being like sort of parenting your parent through her death in certain kinds of ways. So I don't know whether it felt like that at all, or whether that resonates with stories you've heard.
I think certainly. I mean, I think parenting the parent was key, right? I mean, and I think we mentioned that in the piece in some fashion or form. The roles were reversed very quickly, right? And it was really interesting for us, or very kind of key for us, because we went through the whole refugee experience and asylum seeking, and she was really pivotal. She was really, she paid close attention to my development and my well-being and so on and so forth. And all of a sudden, I had about 4 months to kind of just switch that. Like it's kind of that role reversal. At the very same time, I really felt, and I think we mentioned this in the piece, I really felt that I was, both of us were on this track. I didn't know where the track came from. I didn't know where it was going. I had a pretty good idea, but I knew exactly what I needed to do. There's kind of like a tunnel vision of some sort. And say, like day to day, it was clear. Yep, this is time is key with her, calling, making appointments to see her, getting to know my wife's family, and then getting engaged and getting married. And it was all very almost, I'm going to use the word programmatic. But I think I attribute that to the fact that we accepted the circumstances as much as we could. Say, you know what? I mean, there's no, and I remember praying, and I'm praying quite intensely. I think even I prayed to Padre Pio a Catholic saint of healing. Catholicism runs in the family as well. But then all of a sudden, I had this jolt of no, there's no, like, this is not about physical recovery. This is not about physical recovery. Interesting enough, the first night that I sent her to the hospital in the beginning, so when she in November of 2020, I woke up and I had the sense of, oh, this is not the end. I thought, you know what, which means I thought, maybe she's not that gravely ill. But then when I prayed and I got this sense of, no, this is not about physical recovery, I thought, well, there might have been most likely was a spiritual kind of sensibility there, right? And say, well, this is not the end. But then again, right? So there are a number of these profound experiences that kind of took place all throughout this process on multiple different levels. But in terms of this notional rebirth and so on, for me, it was really obvious that we were on this track. I was on this track. I knew exactly what to do, all the way up to the funeral, I think. It was, but thanks so much for the question.
Well, we hope some faith communities listen to this podcast or clergy or theological educators. And we wondered from each of your pieces what words of wisdom would you share to pastors or community members who are supporting people in their caregiving journey. So maybe Laszlo and Elly, you can begin.
Yeah, I mean, for us, one of the big things that carried us through the whole 4-month experience of journeying through palliative care was the faith community that surrounded us, through prayer and through cards and meals. And we had to buy a freezer, a chest freezer, to store the food that we were getting, which was just a wonderful problem to have. And we would have people, so I'm in St. Catharines, Laszlo's in Kitchener, like we were from different communities, and it's also COVID, so you didn't the ability to be physically present in each other's spaces was limited to not a possibility. And yet we felt the presence of that support through bringing cards, through these meals, and also like people would send cards directly to the hospital where Laszlo's mother was staying, and they'd never met her before. They were from my church and just knew that this was somebody who mattered to me and to us, and that was all that mattered for them, was that there's this person who doesn't have a lot of people surrounding them, and we're going to let them know that they're loved, and that you don't have to have met them. So I think, yeah, for us, it was largely that kind of a ministry of presence, of just being available, and then also being available to us when we needed those to take a walk and to decompress about something, or to and it's not about having the right thing to say. I think sometimes it was even just walking in silence and just being there. That was a huge piece for us. The other part was we got married in part of this journey in the hospital chapel with the hospital chaplain and just a few people in attendance, but we were able to have Zoom as part of that too, and just being surrounded by so many people. Our Zoom account was maxed out. We had too many attendees, and so that part of it too, that we had people supporting us through that journey, even though it was very rushed. We have to get this done now because we saw that the beginning of the end was starting to happen, and we wanted to make sure that Laszlo's mother was part of that ceremony, part of that day for us.
Yeah. For me in particular, I thanked them officially, and I also participated in in a reaccreditation program with the Grand River Hospital, it was actually the healthcare workers. My mom was a nurse, so she kind of befriended a lot of people that were around her. But and I'm going to use the word honesty, and brutal honesty, and their honesty and honest appraisal as to what we were dealing with was the one kind of thing that really it was really jarring. I mean, it was really I remember sitting in the palliative care unit at Freeport and just waiting outside in the waiting room and reading the pictures and my messages on the board, and they all dealt with death. And I was like, whoa, this is real, but the very honest messaging and my honest discussions and very clear messages were really important for us, and for me in particular, because that again really helped with knowing exactly what I need to do and really need to be there for her, physically and and so on. So for me, it was the healthcare workers, and I just couldn't thank them enough. I mean, we spoke with the referring physician at the end. So when the morning she passed, and unfortunately only 5% the people whose family members pass away on that unit say thank you. Only 5%. And these professionals are I mean, if it's kind of difficult for me to kind of recap or recall emotionally, but these are superheroes. This is nothing short of superhuman, because one night we had 6 deaths on the unit. And one of the nurses said, "You know what? I can't. I've been working here for decades, and she wasn't able to handle it emotionally. She broke down." So it's a really incredible place, and it's really filled with incredible professionals. I mean, it's unbelievable.
Thank you both for sharing.
Of course.
And Susan.
I was taking notes while you were talking. And I think the temptation is to compare 2 stories. And I think one of the things that came to my mind is the experience with my dad is a marathon, not a sprint. What you went through with your mom, Laszlo, was just like such a shocking experience. My dad is like a really slow goodbye. That's what dementia often is. But I think one of the things that I think about people who, I have a couple of friends who are struggling with long COVID now. And I think some of it that I would say, the question, I think Miriam originally was about what you would say to people who provide ministry. And I think it's don't forget about the people who aren't visible, like that sometimes things drag on, and so it's easy to respond in a crisis. I think when it's not a crisis, but it's just a slow decline or a slow burn or a lifelong thing, it's easy to think, well, we did the thing, we brought the meal. And even checking in with those people, I think, is really big. The other thing that I would say is I'm not cleaning dentures. I'm not doing that. My mom is doing that. So I am already that next level out. And I think one of the things I think about is the model of circles of support, where it's like concentric circles, and you provide support inward. So you support that person, and you support the person who's closer, and you dump your concerns outward. You find somebody more outward. I think that's been helpful for me, but it's also, for me, it's been helpful to remember, even though I think of myself as not at the center on this, to remember that I'm pretty close to the center. So I might think, oh, I'm supporting my mom, I should just do whatever. And I've had to recognize along the way that I have limits. It's my dad. Yeah. And I think my mom has leaned on me a fair bit in the midst of this, and I'm happy to, but I also have had to remember my limits and where this has been hard for me. And places where I've had to say to her at times, I can't hear about certain things. You need to actually have some professional support, because there's places that it's beyond my ability to do something. And I think my mom it's tough to be the caregiver. It is really tough to be that person. And so she's getting good support now, but there have been, like, a drowning person will take other people down with them. Like they just do. It's not out of any kind of malice or meanness or anything, but there's been times where without the support, my mom has been drowning. And so right now things are good, decent. Today actually isn't great for my dad, but mostly it is. And so, yeah, figuring out who needs what support at what point. And but I think for the person, like for whoever it is toward the center, for those in ministry, not to get weary of doing good, like not to forget about people, to be praying, to be saying, hey, I'm praying, to and not always to be saying, are you better? I think that's the other thing. Are things better today? Is it a good day? But to find creative ways of just asking about the day, asking about that. I think those are ways of providing meaningful support.
And may I ask a quick question, if Susan?
And we're taking over, so yeah, go ahead.
Okay, no. A question occurred to me, especially given the fact that this is a marathon for you. So if you could ask yourself or tell yourself something caring, or ask yourself something about this whole experience, what would that be? If you could ask yourself the most compassionate question, what would that be? Or if you could tell yourself the most compassionate thing, what would that be?
I'm not positive I understand the question, but I still have answers. So if I'm wrong, let's ask it again. I think in some ways, the thing that I feel like with my dad that makes me feel it feels meaningful within this is that I think I remember who he is. He may not remember who he is. That's my job for him right now. That's my caregiving is to remember to treat him as like, not in a way that says, oh, he should remember, he should know, but that I know the things that he likes. I know who he's been his whole life. And that feels like, it feels like actually a pretty noble task, actually, to be someone else's memory for them. So that part feels good when I can do that. And I think also for me, another stance that I take that has been really helpful, and not even one I've tried to do, neither of these are ones I've really had to try for, but is to be curious, because dementia is fascinating in that it's like the weather, that there's every once in a while, especially when my dad is exercising, the clouds clear and he's there. And so that helps, I think, in that memory for him, is that it's not who he was. It's somehow, I think, part of who he is. And the dementia is also part of who he is. So it's not like, oh, his real self doesn't have dementia. He does. He has dementia. But I'm intrigued, like the things that reach him, without putting pressure on either of us. I think the other place where I need to bring compassion to myself is I'm afraid this is something that could be inherited. It looks like the kind of dementia he has isn't, but like it's that fear of contagion, I think, of saying like, oh shoot, is this my future? And in some ways for me, because my family is a long-lived family, typically, I've sort of thought, well, we can all be hit by a bus, we can all get cancer, anything can happen, we can have a stroke, anything can happen. But I was sort of thinking that I was just over halfway through my life. And this has changed my sense of life expectancy for myself, to say, what if I do only have this many years of being able to think clearly? And that has been a really hard one for me. So I don't know how I think differently about it, but it's a work in progress to figure out how to think about that, and to not let that, like, today I'm fine, I think. So, but to say, like, that's not a present issue that I have to deal with, and it can distract me from what is present. And yeah, I have my dad right now, and I have my mom right now, and so to approach it with gratitude, I think.
Thank you. No, yeah. You interpreted the question.
Okay.
Well, the next question we wanted to ask is for Laszlo and Elly. So we were wondering, you talk in your piece about how your relationship started during such an intense time with all these things going on with your mom's health. So What role did your faith play in your caregiving for Maria and for each other?
That's a good question. I think yeah, for us we met for the first time in person the day that Ontario announced that everything was shutting down. And so Laszlo working for a school that universities were Monday was going to be a different kind of day, and I'm working for a church where Sunday was going to be a very different day. Yeah, we kind of stepped into our relationship in a world that was surrounded with turbulence, and then we actually ended up spending 3 months, like the next 3 months of just not seeing each other in person. And so for us, what that meant was, well, because we were in different health units and he was living with his mom who's in her 70s, and it was just, yeah, we didn't know what to expect. But for us, that meant that our relationship became I think we connected on an emotional level very quickly, because all we had was talking, right? We couldn't just go and do fun things. It was, we just spoke to each other every day on video chats. And so then I do feel like we got to a deep point that by the time that this news hit for us, we were already in like a pretty solid spot to support each other well. I think one of the faith things that well, for both of us too, is when we met each other, we'd both like prayed about meeting somebody. We both have had negative past experiences in relationships, and so entered into this one with, okay, God, what do you have for us here? And so I think like that was really a foundation of our beginning, was to find somebody who shared our faith and who would journey with us through that. And so then I think when we got the news of Laszlo's mother, it was, we have this belief that we do believe that God has the capacity to heal her, right? That there is sort of that piece that's there, and yet there's also this, well, nobody has ever survived from this, right? And so you want to live into the, well, what if praying for healing means that she gets eternal rest with Christ, with God, right? Like what if what I want is not necessarily within God's eternal plan, and how does our relationship within this fit within that plan? And I think when we look back, like even if I look at something as mundane as timing for things, when churches were shut down in Ontario were pretty much exactly the dates that Laszlo's mother was in palliative care, which freed up my weekends that I didn't need to be somewhere physically because we recorded services. And so that allowed me every single weekend I could be in Kitchener and not have to think about, oh, I need to be at church on Sunday. It was, we recorded this. And so even just something as simple as that was, we could see that, that God's hand was working through shutdowns of all things. So, yeah.
Yeah, I think, I mean, that's an incredible question. I think it'll take us probably the better part of our lives to kind of unpack this, because there are too many things that happened in a way. Speaking about timing, I mean, we met on the day that the world shut down in Ontario. Unbeknownst to me at that time, actually, that was the day of the death of my father in Europe. And then we kind of went through that kind of, because my father, well, we've been estranged since I was 5 years old, so I didn't really have a relationship with him. But then he passed away that day, and then we kind of fast forward a year. We got married, and we tried to rekindle some sort of relationship with his family, and that didn't work out, and so on and so forth. And then of course us meeting and being able to do being able to get married in a hospital chapel with 5 people. There are too many too many things that happened that were way beyond our plans. And I think going back to Susan's first question about births and when things don't go as you planned. Well, I don't think anything went as we would imagine ever. So that, but then that really compelled. I mean, I never would have thought that I would get married in this way, or nothing at all. I mean, the playbook was way out the window. I mean, just but at the same time, you are led. I felt being led certainly by faith. I also changed churches. That was the other thing. So I went from a Catholic church to Mennonite church, actually, Waterloo North, and then yeah, and then married a Dutch CRC person. So now with a bunch of Dutch people. But that itself, I mean, I keep I'm trying to convince the congregation here to take this seriously, because again, it is a huge testament of faith. I mean, they embraced my mom and me without knowing who we were, who we were. I mean, that's the I think more ways than one, that's the true mark of a Christian community. When they didn't know my mom was at all, and they prayed for her. They sent gifts and meals and cards and support, and they didn't know who I was either. And they embraced us without any question and unconditionally. So there are way too many. So a number of things happened during this journey that really spark of faith and of love and of divine love for us.
Mhm. Yeah, and I think in a lot of ways too, just to kind of carry off of that, was that the feeling of being carried throughout the whole thing. That yeah, when we look back, it's like I don't know how.
No, right.
How did we navigate
No,
all those challenges and the things that we faced? And really, the only thing would be to say that yeah, I think we were carried by the prayers and by the support around us as well. Mhm.
no. I mean, that was way beyond human. I think it was not. I would have not been able to. No, I'm sorry. Emotionally, mentally, and I was still teaching, and I was
Yeah.
teaching my master's class, a master's course at the University of Waterloo too, and it was just no, it wasn't. So I think divine intervention and divine care was all over this thing.
Yeah, I'm so glad you felt cared for and cared by community, by God. So I pray
Yes.
you still feel cared by God and others do too. Thank you, Susan. We wanted, as your storyteller and writer, we wanted to have you talk about how theology and storytelling and meaning making all work together, and how you see them as really inseparable, I think.
That's an essay question, isn't it?
Yeah, it is.
It's a long answer essay.
So just like,
I'll try on this. I think one of the things, I'll just tell a little story since we're talking about storytelling. My dad's diagnosis came while he was my parents were on holidays on the East Coast, and I got a text while I was in a theology class, and it was a Tuesday night, and then my dad was hospitalized because they weren't sure. It was sort of an acute episode. And every week on Tuesday in the month of October in 2021, I'm sitting in class and I'm getting a message from my mom. Even if the rest of the week had been calm, he was hospitalized there for 3 or 4 weeks and then flown home. And so it really juxtaposed with my theology class. But I was also at the same time doing a reading course that I had put together about how we can do theology through stories. And so it seems like an obvious thing that I then read to my dad, but it wasn't obvious. And one of the things that I have thought about is the fastest growing group of people, the fastest growing religious group in the world are the nuns, but not the Catholic nuns, the other nuns, NONES, the people who say, yeah, no, I'm not connecting with faith at all. I'm not. And people after COVID, like numbers have declined. People who are even just, they may be people of faith, but not attending church. And I think one of the things that I have found, I think that in the same way that at one point people would take the Bible and go somewhere else and translate it into the language there of those people. I think there's a huge task for people who know theology, who know God, who are people of faith, to figure out how to translate into other contexts. And so that could be with the people who are not people of faith. And my dad is not a person of faith. I wasn't going, my dad did not want me to read the Bible to him. I didn't go through the Gospels with him. But the story that I read, I feel like for me as a person of faith, for me as someone who's doing theology, those kinds of like stories, when I write them or when I'm reading them and using them with other people, I've led a book club for people who are like all over the map in terms of faith. And it's a place for people to engage with those big questions. Like it's not to say that I'm not prioritizing actual sacred texts, but for people who don't, for people who would never open a Bible, wouldn't walk into a church, they can find access through a story. And I think the job of the person who does theology, the person who cares about that and wants, in the same way that I might want to introduce two friends together, I think that's the job of a storyteller, whether there's a writer or a reader. A theologian can take those two things and use it as a placemaking activity that translates theology to people who, because even though those people may not be attending church, might never open a Bible, might be afraid they're going to be struck by lightning by God, whatever it is that they feel like, those people still have questions in life. Those people have all been through the pandemic like we have. They've had people in their lives, they've had experiences. They are doing that meaning making. And I think sometimes the kinds of tools they're open to are tools that speak to all of us and their stories. So for me, that's why I think stories do the thing well. That's my essay. There, I answered my long answer question.
Thank you for such a wise answer in such a short time. And Amy and I know the power of choice too, and theological reflection, and that's part of our work with the journal and the podcast is what can we learn from each other by sharing pieces of our stories and our relationship with God and with people. So thank you, Susan and Laszlo and Elly, for joining us today. And I know the weather's beautiful today, so I hope you get to enjoy some of it.